Dog won't stop barking at construction site. Police arrive and what they find buried stuns everyone. Max's sudden growl cut through the quiet morning like a knife. Sarah Collins immediately tensed in the driver's seat, her hands tightening on the steering wheel of the Atlanta PD K9 unit. In 6 years of partnership, she had never heard that particular sound from her Belgian Malinois. It was somewhere between alert and alarm, with an edge that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. The abandoned Reynolds construction site loomed ahead, a skeleton of concrete and steel against the pale October sky. Sarah had driven past it hundreds of times during their morning patrols, but today was different. Max's behavior shifted the moment they approached the chain-link fence, his usually relaxed patrol posture transforming into rigid attention. "What is it, boy?" Sarah murmured, slowing the vehicle. The dashboard clock read 6:47 a.m., too early for any legitimate construction work, though the site had been dormant for months anyway. Through the rearview mirror, she watched Max's ears prick forward, his nose working overtime as he processed something beyond human perception. When she made to continue their route, Max let out a low whine, their private signal for immediate attention needed. Sarah had learned to trust those instincts. They had led to major drug busts, saved lives during search and rescue operations, and once even prevented a terrorist attack at the Hartsfield-Jackson airport. This sound was different, though, more urgent. Sarah guided the patrol car through the rusty gates, gravel crunching under the tires. The first rays of sunlight cast long shadows between the abandoned structures, creating a maze of light and darkness. Before she could fully stop, Max was already pouring at the door, another behavior that was completely out of character for her typically disciplined partner. "Max, wait!" But for the first time in their partnership, her command went unheeded. The moment she released the door, Max bounded out, moving with singular purpose toward the eastern section of the site. Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her weapon as she followed, her boots leaving clear prints in the morning dew. The site was a graveyard of half-finished dreams, concrete pillars reaching skyward like ancient ruins, stacks of weathered lumber and rusting equipment left behind when Reynolds Construction went bankrupt. Max navigated the obstacle course with practiced ease, finally stopping at a patch of disturbed earth near a massive foundation pillar. Then he started barking, not the sharp, authoritative bark he used when finding drugs, or the excited yip of discovering a hidden suspect. This was different, almost desperate. Max began to dig, his powerful paws throwing dirt with focused determination. "Max, here!" Sarah called again, but her partner ignored her completely, continuing to dig with an intensity she had never witnessed. She keyed her radio. "Dispatch, this is K9 Unit 217. I'm at the old Reynolds site on Industrial Boulevard. Need backup and CSI. Something's not right here." Movement caught her eye. A figure in an expensive suit, watching from the shadow of a nearby building. Their eyes met briefly before he melted away into the darkness. Sarah drew her weapon, moving closer to Max while scanning for any immediate threats. The next hour unfolded like a fever dream. Max refused to leave his spot, continuing to dig until his paws were raw. When the CSI team arrived with proper equipment, Sarah had to physically hold him back, feeling his muscles trembling with urgency under her hands. She had seen him excited about finds before, but this was different. This was personal. The excavation proceeded methodically, each layer of dirt removed with careful precision. At first, there was nothing, just packed earth and construction debris. But Max's behavior grew more intense with each passing minute, his body practically vibrating with certainty. Then the shovel hit something solid. The metallic clang silenced everyone on scene. Even Max stopped barking, though his eyes remained fixed on the spot. Sarah felt her pulse quicken as the CSI team carefully brushed away the remaining dirt, revealing the corner of a metal briefcase. It took another 30 minutes to properly document and extract the case. It was high-end, the kind executives used to carry important documents, though years underground had left it corroded and stained. The team carefully placed it on a tarp, preparing to open it with proper evidence protocols. Sarah knelt beside Max, finally able to check his paws. They were scraped raw from his desperate digging, but he showed no sign of pain or distress. His attention remained locked on the briefcase, a low whine building in his throat. When they finally opened it, the morning sun illuminated contents that would shake the Atlanta Police Department to its core. Stacks of documents, photographs, and a blood-stained police badge belonging to Detective James Morrison. Missing 5 years and presumed dead. Sarah recognized the badge instantly. Morrison had been one of the department's most decorated officers before his disappearance. The list of names made her blood run cold. Judges, politicians, business leaders, some of Atlanta's most powerful figures, all connected by a web of corruption that Morrison had apparently uncovered. And at the top of the list, written in what appeared to be dried blood, "Trust no one." Captain Reynolds, no relation to the construction company, approached, his face grave. "Collins, you and Max just stepped into something big. Are you sure you want to pursue this?" Sarah looked at her partner, who met her gaze with unwavering loyalty. In 6 years, Max had never been wrong. She thought about Morrison's badge, about the blood-stained warning, about the man in the suit who had melted away into the shadows. "With all due respect, sir," she replied, her hand resting on Max's head. "We're already in it, and we're not backing down." The captain nodded slowly, knowing better than to argue. As he walked away, Sarah heard distant sirens approaching. Whatever they had uncovered, whatever forces they had just disturbed, one thing was certain. There was no turning back now. Max had made that decision for both of them the moment he started digging, and Sarah trusted her partner's instincts more than anything else in the world. The fluorescent lights of the evidence room cast harsh shadows across Detective Morrison's badge. Sarah turned it over in her gloved hands, studying the dried blood that had seeped into the metal's grooves. Behind her, Max stood guard at the door, his posture alert despite the exhaustion of their morning discovery. "You shouldn't be handling that evidence, Collins." Lieutenant Garcia's voice startled her. She hadn't heard him enter. "This case is being reassigned to major crimes." Sarah kept her eyes on the badge. "Sir, Max found it. This isn't a missing person case anymore, Collins. It's potential homicide involving a police officer. And with those names we found..." He paused, his expression softening slightly. "You did good work today. You and Max both. But this is bigger than a K9 unit." A low growl rumbled in Max's throat, unusual for him around fellow officers. Garcia took an instinctive step back, and Sarah noticed something she hadn't before. A slight tremor in his left hand as he reached for the evidence bag. "Just give me 24 hours, Sarah said, an idea forming. Morrison was K9 too. He would have left clues that only another handler would recognize. Garcia hesitated. Sarah pressed her advantage. His partner was killed 2 weeks before he disappeared. That's not a coincidence. The lieutenant's eyes darted to Max, then back to Sarah. Finally, he nodded. 24 hours, but you report everything directly to me. And Collins, watch your back. The warning seemed to hang in the air as he left. Sarah waited until his footsteps faded before pulling out her phone. The man in the suit at the construction site had been too well dressed for a random bystander. She needed to know who had been tipped off about their discovery. "Come on, Max," she whispered, heading for the parking garage. "Let's see what else Morrison left behind." The drive to Morrison's former residence took them through Atlanta's changing neighborhoods. The detective's old house sat on a quiet street in Grant Park, now occupied by a young family. Sarah parked across the street, studying the property. Max's ears perked up as a jogger passed, the third in 5 minutes. "Too many runners for 2 p.m. on a Tuesday," Sarah muttered. Max's tail twitched in agreement. They were being watched. A text lit up her phone, coordinates and a single word from an unknown number. "Remember." Sarah's pulse quickened. The coordinates led to Piedmont Park, where Morrison used to train Zeus. She glanced at Max, who was already watching her expectantly. "Want to go to the park, boy?" The park was busy with the usual afternoon crowd, but Sarah's trained eye caught the subtle signs. Men with earpieces pretending to read newspapers, a van that had circled the block twice. Someone was very interested in their investigation. Max led her straight to the old training area, now overgrown with weeds. He began working the ground methodically, just as he'd been trained. Sarah made a show of running him through basic commands, all while watching their observers. 15 minutes in, Max's behavior changed. He stopped at a weathered oak tree, nose working overtime. Sarah approached casually, pretending to praise him. There, carved into the bark at knee height, a series of numbers. She committed them to memory, then continued the pretense of training. As they left the park, she counted 4 different vehicles falling into surveillance patterns behind them. Someone was getting nervous. Back at the precinct, Sarah locked herself in the K9 unit's break room. The numbers were a case file, but not from their department. She had to call in a favor from records to access it. A seemingly routine inspection report from 5 years ago, filed by the city's building commission. The Reynolds site, she breathed, scanning the document. It was supposed to be a 50-story luxury development. The permits were fast-tracked, inspections rushed through. She looked at Max. Morrison wasn't investigating corruption in construction. He found something during construction. A knock at the door made them both jump. Officer Chen, a rookie, looked nervous. Detective Collins, there's someone here asking about Morrison's case. Says he's from Internal Affairs, but Sarah was already moving. Where? Lobby. But Collins, he knew about the briefcase before we announced finding it. Sarah and Max took the back stairs. Through the lobby windows, she spotted the man in the expensive suit from the construction site. He was flanked by 2 others, all wearing the same federal agent look that screamed fake to her trained eye. Her phone buzzed again. Back door, now. This time she recognized the number. Garcia. They slipped out just as she heard raised voices from the lobby. In the alley, Garcia's unmarked car waited with the engine running. Get in, he ordered. Both of you. Sarah hesitated. Max's hackles were raised, but he wasn't aggressive, a good sign. She opened the back door, and Max jumped in without hesitation. Morrison left a fail-safe, Garcia said as they pulled away. If anything happened to him, evidence would surface in specific locations, specific times. That briefcase was just the first. Why tell me this now? Because those men in there, they're not Internal Affairs, and they just authorized a warrant for your arrest. Apparently, you've been suspected of drug trafficking for months. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Morrison trusted my sister. She was his partner in major crimes before. He swallowed hard. I know where the next cache is, but we have less than 3 hours. Sarah looked at Max in the rearview mirror. He sat perfectly alert, ready for whatever came next. She thought about Morrison's blood-stained warning. Trust no one. But sometimes she realized trusting no one meant trusting your partner above all else. Where are we headed? The old train yard. Hope your partner's ready to dig again. Max's tail thumped against the seat, one emphatic beat. He was ready, and so was she. Sunset painted the abandoned train yard in shades of rust and blood. Sarah crouched behind a derailed boxcar. Max pressed against her leg, both watching Garcia approach the old switching station. Her hand rested on her service weapon. Trust only went so far. Clear, Garcia called softly. But we need to hurry. Those false trafficking charges won't hold up long under scrutiny, but they only need to hold up long enough. Sarah surveyed the graffiti-covered building. Why here? Because this is where it started. Garcia pulled out a weathered photograph. 5 years ago, Morrison and Zeus were conducting a routine drug sweep. They found something else instead. The photo showed a younger Morrison with his German Shepherd partner. They stood proudly in front of the K9 training facility, Zeus's coat gleaming in the sunlight. Sarah remembered that day. She had been a rookie handler then, struggling with an over-enthusiastic Max during their first week of training. Morrison saw something in you two, Garcia continued, leading them inside. He told my sister that Max reminded him of Zeus, too smart for his own good. The memory hit Sarah like a physical blow. Morrison staying late after training, helping her channel Max's endless energy into focused searches. Find the truth, he would say, both to the dog and to her. The evidence never lies. Max's sudden alertness snapped her back to the present. He moved purposefully toward a section of wall, nose working the air. Sarah recognized the behavior, the same intensity he had shown at the construction site. Zeus did the same thing, Garcia said quietly. Right before, he trailed off, but Sarah knew the story. Zeus had been found poisoned in his kennel 2 weeks before Morrison disappeared. The official report called it an accident. The wall looked solid, but Max's behavior said otherwise. Sarah ran her hands over the surface, feeling for inconsistencies. The evidence never lies, she muttered, then stopped. There, a slight difference in texture. The hidden compartment was clever, barely large enough for the thin metal tube inside. Sarah extracted it carefully, while Max kept watch at the door. Inside, more documents, a USB drive, and a handwritten letter. Sarah, Garcia's voice had an edge of urgency. We've got company! Flashlight beams swept the yard outside. Sarah quickly photographed each document with her phone while Garcia kept watch. The letter was addressed to her. Morrison had known she would be the one to find it. My dear protégé, it began. If you're reading this, then Max has proven to be everything I knew he would be. Zeus saw it in him during training, that rare combination of intelligence and unflinching loyalty. You'll need both to finish what we started. Footsteps echoed outside. Max's ears pricked forward, but he remained silent. Another skill Morrison had helped refine. Sarah read faster. The Reynolds development was never about luxury apartments. The site sits on top of old railway tunnels, perfect for moving products without detection. But we found something worse than drugs. They're trafficking people, Sarah. Children. The construction was a cover for expanding the tunnel network. Collins, Garcia whispered urgently. Time's up. Sarah kept reading. Zeus found the first proof, a hidden entrance, fresh scents, scared children. But before we could gather enough evidence, they came for us. Zeus died protecting that evidence. I managed to hide it, spread it out where only another K9 team could find it. Trust your partner, Sarah. Max will lead you to the truth, just like Zeus led me. The letter ended with a series of numbers, coordinates. Sarah committed them to memory before returning everything to the tube. They couldn't risk taking it with them, not with what was coming. There's a back exit, Garcia said, through the old maintenance tunnels. If we... Max's growl cut him off. Sarah spun around to find Garcia holding a gun, not at the door, but at them. I'm sorry, he said, and he actually sounded it. But I can't let you continue. My sister, they still have her. The betrayal stung, but it wasn't surprising. Trust no one. Sarah raised her hands slowly. How long have they been holding her? 5 years, since she helped Morrison hide the evidence. Garcia's hand trembled. They send me proof of life every month. As long as I play along, she stays alive. Max hadn't moved, his eyes fixed on Garcia. Sarah remembered Morrison's training sessions. Distance control, he would say. Sometimes the best attack is patience. They'll kill her anyway, Sarah said softly. You know that. Morrison knew too much. Zeus knew too much. Your sister. She's only alive because you're useful. A flash of doubt crossed Garcia's face. Outside, the footsteps grew closer. Help us expose them, Sarah pressed. All of them. It's what your sister would want. The moment stretched like a wire about to snap. Then Max's ears twitched, a new sound. Garcia turned slightly toward it and Sarah moved. The gun clattered across the floor as Max lunged forward, not to attack, but to block Garcia's recovery. Sarah had him pinned in seconds. My sister, Garcia gasped. Please. We'll find her, Sarah promised, securing his weapons. But first, we need to get out of here. Those men outside, they're not coming to help you. As if to confirm her words, a voice crackled over Garcia's radio. Target located. Terminate all witnesses. Garcia's face went pale. The maintenance tunnel. There's a hidden door behind the electrical panel. Sarah helped him up, keeping Max between them. Start walking. And Garcia, If this is another trap, Max won't be so gentle next time. They found the door just as flashlights swept into the building. Sarah could hear men speaking into radios, coordinating their search. The door protested quietly as they pulled it open, revealing a dark passage beyond. Morrison used this route, Garcia whispered as they entered the tunnel. It connects to the same network under the Reynolds site. Sarah thought about the coordinates from Morrison's letter. Then we're going back where it started. Max, find the truth. Max took point without hesitation, leading them into the darkness. Behind them, angry voices discovered their escape. But Sarah smiled in the dark. Morrison had trained them well. The evidence never lies. And now they knew where to find it. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, the sound echoing through the maintenance tunnel. Sarah's flashlight beam caught the glint of Max's reflective vest as he navigated the passage ahead. Behind them, Garcia stumbled along, his breathing heavy in the stale air. They'll figure out where we went, Garcia said between breaths. These tunnels are on the original city plans. We need to... Max froze, his posture shifting to alert. Sarah immediately killed her light, pressing against the damp wall. Voices echoed from a connecting tunnel ahead, too far to make out words, but getting closer. Alternative route? Sarah whispered to Garcia. He shook his head. This is the only way to the Reynolds site. Unless... He hesitated. There's an old ventilation shaft about 50 yards back. Maintenance crews used to use it for access before the new system was installed. Sarah looked at Max, who remained focused on the approaching voices. His tail was straight, no immediate threat, but caution needed. She made her decision. Show us! The shaft was narrow, barely wide enough for Max to squeeze through. Sarah went first, then helped Max navigate the tight space. Garcia followed last, his movements careful and controlled despite his obvious fear. My sister, he said as they climbed. Her name is Elena. She was Morrison's partner in major crimes before transferring to K9. She's the one who recommended you for the program. Sarah paused in her climb. Elena Garcia, the instructor who wrote the manual on evidence detection? The same. She saw what Morrison saw in you and Max. Said you had the same fire she did at your age. His voice cracked slightly. When they took her, I thought playing along would keep her safe. I didn't know they were using me to track everyone Morrison trusted. A distant explosion cut off any response Sarah might have made. The shaft trembled, dust and debris raining down. Max whined softly, not from fear, but warning. They're destroying the evidence, Garcia realized. The tunnels, the access points, they're going to bury it all. Sarah checked her phone. No signal, but the photo gallery confirmed she still had the images of Morrison's documents. The coordinates he'd left played through her mind. 33°45'N, 84°T3W. Somewhere in downtown Atlanta. They emerged in what appeared to be an old utility room. Pipes lined the walls, most broken or corroded. Max immediately began working the space, his training kicking in despite their hurried escape. We need to move, Garcia urged. If they're destroying evidence, Elena... Max's bark interrupted him, sharp, insistent. Sarah recognized that sound. He'd found something. Behind a fallen section of pipe, a metal door stood partially hidden by years of debris. Its surface was clean, where a similar door would have shown rust and age. Someone had been using it. This isn't on any city plans, Garcia said, studying the modern keypad lock. Sarah examined the frame carefully. Look at the wear patterns on the floor. Heavy use, recent. She pointed to scuff marks, and they're dragging something, or someone. Max pawed at the ground near the door, then looked at Sarah expectantly. She knelt to examine the spot, finding traces of dirt different from the tunnel dust around them. Morrison's construction site, she realized. They're moving people through here. Garcia's face hardened. Elena found this. This is what got her taken. Another explosion rocked the room, closer this time. Sarah could hear debris falling in the tunnel they'd just left. The keypad's military grade, Garcia said. We'd need a tech team to... Sarah was already moving. Max, find it. Her partner went to work immediately, nose working every inch of the door frame and surrounding wall. Within seconds, he scratched at a spot near the floor. a small maintenance panel hidden by years of grime. The panel contained a mass of wires, but Sarah knew what to look for. Morrison had taught them both about electronic locks during their training. It took 30 seconds to cross the right wires. The door clicked open with a soft hiss. "Wait!" Garcia grabbed Sarah's arm. "You don't know what's on the other side. At least call for backup." Sarah checked her phone again. Still no signal. "They're destroying evidence, possibly killing witnesses. We don't have time for backup." She looked at Max, who stood ready at the door. "Besides, I have all the backup I need." The passage beyond was different. Modern construction, LED lighting, ventilation, signs of regular use. Max took point without being told, moving with practiced stealth. They hadn't gone 50 yards when they heard it. Crying, young voices speaking in multiple languages. Max's ears pricked forward, but he maintained his tactical position. A security camera hung ahead, its red light blinking. Sarah had seconds to make a decision. "Garcia, how long have they had Elena?" 5 years, 2 months, and 14 days. Sarah nodded. "Long enough." She raised her gun and shot out the camera. Alarms immediately blared to life. The crying voices went silent, replaced by shouts and running feet. "They'll kill her," Garcia said, panic edging into his voice. Sarah checked her weapon. "No, they won't, because now they have a bigger problem." She looked at her partner. "Max, find them. Find them all." Max took off down the corridor, Sarah close behind. Garcia hesitated only a moment before following. They had just reached the first intersection when gunfire erupted from ahead. Sarah took cover, returning fire as Max circled wide, another Morrison tactic. "Create chaos," he always said, "then exploit it." Through the chaos of alarms and gunfire, Sarah heard what she was waiting for, Max's attack bark, followed by a scream and more gunfire. But it wasn't aimed at them anymore. "They're shooting at their own people," Garcia said in disbelief. Sarah smiled grimly. "No, they're shooting at ghosts. Max is herding them exactly where we want them." Above them, through layers of concrete and steel, another explosion shook the complex. Time was running out. But somewhere in this maze of tunnels, Elena Garcia was waiting. And Sarah had made a promise. To Garcia, to Morrison, and most importantly, to herself. "Ready?" she asked Garcia. He chambered a round in his backup piece. "For Elena, always." Sarah nodded once. "Max, find her. Find Elena." Her partner's bark echoed through the tunnels, not an alert or an attack signal, but something else, a promise of his own. Max's tracking led them deeper into the tunnel complex. The modern section gave way to older passages, where exposed pipes leaked steam and emergency lights cast strange shadows. Sarah kept close to the wall, following her partner's confident movements while Garcia covered their rear. "Wait!" Sarah raised her fist, the signal to halt. Ahead, Max had stopped at a junction, his posture showing controlled alertness. Sarah could hear it too. Multiple voices, the click of weapons being readied. "There's another way around," Garcia whispered. But Sarah was already checking her ammunition. 6 rounds left, 1 magazine in reserve. "No time," she replied softly. "They're moving everyone out. Elena too." She looked at her partner. "Max, find us a way." Without hesitation, Max began working the perimeter of the junction. Sarah had seen him do this countless times during training, analyzing air currents, seeking alternative routes. Morrison had called it tactical problem-solving. The dog stopped at a maintenance access panel, looking back at Sarah expectantly. She examined the panel, finding it led to a narrow utility crawl space running parallel to the main tunnel. "It'll be tight," she warned Garcia. Another explosion rocked the complex, closer than the others. Dust rained from the ceiling as voices ahead grew more urgent. They were running out of time. The crawl space was claustrophobic, barely wide enough for Max to squeeze through. Sarah followed, feeling the press of pipes and conduit against her tactical vest. Garcia brought up the rear, his breathing heavy in the confined space. They emerged behind a stack of storage crates. Sarah counted 4 armed men in the larger chamber ahead, all focused on a heavy security door. 2 more were escorting a line of frightened children toward a different exit. Target is secure, one man spoke into a radio. Proceeding with disposal protocol. Sarah's blood ran cold. She recognized that voice. Judge Henderson, her former mentor, the man who had sworn her in as a K-9 officer. A woman's voice responded from somewhere ahead. Negative. The K-9 unit is still unaccounted for. Nothing proceeds until Collins and the dog are neutralized. Garcia tensed. Elena, he breathed. But Sarah heard something else in Elena's voice, a subtle emphasis on K-9 unit. She was sending a message the same way Morrison had. Garcia, Sarah whispered, when did Elena transfer to K-9? After 3 years in major crimes. She said she needed a change, wanted to work with... He stopped, realization dawning. She went to K-9 right after finding these tunnels. Sarah nodded. She wasn't taken. She went underground to gather evidence. She looked at Max, who was watching the guards' movements intently. Morrison didn't just train us, he built a contingency plan. Move it! Henderson barked at the children. Transport's waiting. Sarah made her decision. Garcia, get those kids out. Max and I will handle the rest. But Elena trusts us to do this right. Sarah checked her weapon one last time. Max, time to end this. What happened next was a blur of precise chaos. Max burst from cover with a thunderous bark, drawing fire away from the children. Sarah rolled right, taking down 2 guards before they could adjust their aim. Garcia used the distraction to reach the children, herding them towards safety. Henderson turned, raising his weapon, but froze when he saw Sarah. Officer Collins, this isn't what it looks like. Save it, Sarah growled, keeping him covered. 5 years of trafficking children through construction sites, using your position to approve buildings specifically designed for human smuggling. It's exactly what it looks like. You don't understand, Henderson began, but Max's growl cut him off. The dog had positioned himself for an attack, just as Morrison had taught them. Call off your dog, Henderson demanded, his judicial authority cracking. Sarah smiled coldly. He doesn't answer to criminals. More explosions echoed through the complex. Part of the ceiling collapsed behind them, blocking the exit they'd used. Henderson smiled. It's over, Collins. This whole section is rigged to collapse. In 10 minutes, there won't be any evidence left, just tragic casualties in a construction accident, including Atlanta's finest K-9 team. A new voice rang out. I wouldn't be so sure about that. Elena Garcia stepped through the security door, her weapon trained on Henderson. She looked older than her photo, harder, but her eyes were sharp as ever. Sarah, Max, Morrison always said you two would crack this case wide open. Henderson's face contorted with rage. He spun toward Elena, weapon rising. Max was already in motion, 5 years of training, launching him through the air. The judge's shot went wide as 80 pounds of Belgian Malinois slammed into his chest. Sarah kicked his gun away as Max held him pinned, teeth bared inches from his throat. Elena quickly moved to secure him, while Sarah checked the tunnel's integrity. The walls were starting to crack. 5 years of evidence, Elena said, handcuffing Henderson. Every meeting, every transaction, every name, all recorded and backed up to secure servers. Morrison's last gift to the department. We need to move, Sarah urged, hearing more debris falling. This place is coming down. They ran for the exit, Max taking point to guide them through the falling debris. Behind them, Henderson shouted threats that were swallowed by the sound of collapsing tunnels. They emerged into the late afternoon sun just as the final charges detonated. Sarah watched the Reynolds construction site sink into itself, taking decades of corruption with it. But the evidence was safe. The children were safe, and Atlanta's biggest criminal conspiracy was about to face justice. Elena knelt to rub Max's ears. Morrison would be proud of both of you. Sarah looked at her partner, dusty and tired but alert as ever. He trained us well. Max's tail wagged once, mission accomplished. Rain drummed against the windows of the Atlanta Police Department as Sarah watched the news unfold on the break room television. Max dozed at her feet, though his ears still twitched at every movement in the hallway. Old habits died hard. Even after the chaos of the past 72 hours, he remained vigilant. Federal authorities today announced the indictment of 32 individuals connected to what prosecutors are calling the largest human trafficking ring in Georgia's history, the Anchor reported. Among those charged are Superior Court Judge William Henderson, State Senator Marcus Roberts, and several high-ranking members of the Atlanta business community. Sources say the investigation began with a routine K-9 unit patrol that uncovered crucial evidence at an abandoned construction site. Sarah sipped her coffee, remembering how it all started with Max's persistent barking. The evidence Elena had gathered during her 5 years undercover was overwhelming. Construction permits, offshore accounts, surveillance footage. She documented everything while playing the role of helpless captive. Each piece now formed part of an airtight case against some of Atlanta's most powerful figures. "You should be out there with the brass," Elena said, entering the break room. She looked more like herself now, the harsh edges of her undercover persona softening. Her brother Garcia stood behind her, still protective even after learning the truth about her mission. "You and Max broke the case." Sarah shook her head. "We just finished what Morrison started." Speaking of Morrison, Elena sat down, sliding a file across the table. They found Zeus. Sarah opened the file carefully. The photos showed a small memorial garden behind the K-9 training facility. Morrison buried him there? "With full honors," Elena nodded. "I helped him do it the night before he disappeared. He knew they were coming for him, but he wouldn't leave Zeus in that kennel labeled as an accident." She reached down to scratch Max's ears. He said someday the right team would understand the message. The break room door opened again. Captain Reynolds entered, looking exhausted but satisfied. Behind him, several FBI agents waited in the hallway. "Ladies, they're ready for you in the press conference." "Sir, I'd rather not," Sarah began, but the captain raised his hand. "Not optional, Collins. The FBI wants to publicly thank the K-9 unit that brought down a federal judge and exposed systemic corruption. Besides," he smiled slightly, "Morrison's family will be there. They've waited 5 years to know the truth about their son." Sarah looked at Max, who was already sitting at attention, ready for duty. She remembered Morrison's words during training. "A good K-9 team doesn't seek glory, but sometimes showing others what's possible is part of the job." The press conference was a blur of cameras and questions. Sarah kept her answers brief and professional, deflecting praise to the joint task force that had helped process Elena's evidence. Max sat perfectly still beside her, the model of K-9 discipline, though she could feel his eagerness to return to regular duties. His paw occasionally brushed against her boot, their private signal that he was ready to move on to the next mission. Afterward, in the quiet of the K-9 unit's office, Morrison's mother approached them. Her eyes were damp, but she smiled as she knelt to greet Max. The dog's usual professional demeanor softened as he gently nuzzled her hand, as if he somehow knew who she was. "James always said this one was special," she said softly. "The day you two were paired, he told me he'd finally found the team that could finish his work." She pressed something into Sarah's hand, a weathered K-9 training whistle. "He would have wanted you to have this." The whistle was old, its silver surface etched with Zeus's name and badge number. Sarah recognized it from training sessions, remembered how Morrison would use different tones to signal complex commands. The metal was worn smooth in places from years of use. "Thank you," she managed, emotion thick in her throat. "No," Morrison's mother squeezed her hand. "Thank you for bringing my boy justice and for showing everyone what he died protecting." Later that evening, Sarah and Max walked through Piedmont Park, retracing the routes where Morrison had trained them years ago. The rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and sharp. The setting sun painted the clouds in shades of purple and gold, a fitting end to a day of resolution. She found herself at the old oak tree where they'd found Morrison's coded message. The bark had been cleaned of graffiti, and a small plaque now marked the spot. "In memory of Detective James Morrison and K-9 Zeus, they showed us the way." Sarah touched the plaque briefly, then looked at her partner. Max met her gaze with unwavering focus, ready for whatever came next. She pulled out Morrison's whistle, studying it in the fading light. The engraving caught the last rays of sun, making Zeus's name glow like a beacon. "You know what Morrison used to say about endings?" she asked Max, his ears perked forward. "They're just new beginnings in disguise." As if on cue, her radio crackled. "K9 Unit 217, possible suspicious activity reported at the docks. Available to respond?" Sarah smiled, clipping the whistle to her vest next to her badge. "Copy that, dispatch. Unit 217 responding." Max was already moving toward the car, his stride purposeful and eager. The city needed them, and they were ready. Morrison and Zeus had shown them the way. Now it was their turn to light the path for others, to carry on the legacy of what a true K9 partnership could achieve. "Let's go to work, partner." Max's tail wagged once. A new mission, a new beginning, but the same unshakable bond between handler and dog. Together they moved into the gathering dusk, ready to face whatever challenges awaited. Behind them, the small plaque caught the last rays of sunlight, a reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of justice start with a simple, unwavering trust between partners. The truth about Morrison and Zeus was finally known. The corrupt had been brought to justice. The victims would find their way home. But for Sarah and Max, this wasn't an ending. It was just another chapter in their ongoing story of loyalty, courage, and the unbreakable bond between a K9 officer and her partner.